everyone, I'm Adi.
Hi everyone, I'm Ala.
And today we will talk about relocation. As you know, the world, becomes very small. And because of that, we have a mix. For example, I'm married to an American man. It happens. And I'm from Israel. So
That's right, and I am from Russia originally, and I'm married to an American man as well.
yes.
So we have mixed marriages.
Yes.
So what Adi and I wanted to talk to you about today is the issue of relocation. When married couples find themselves in a position during a divorce or a separation where one of them wants to move out of the country with the children.
Yes.
What do you do then?
And it very depends. It depends if both of the parents, let's say Israel, for example, if both of the parents are Israelis or just one of them, because it makes it much harder if just one of them is Israeli. And then, of course, you can separate it from mediation, litigation. So it depends. So let's start with mediation. So when it comes to mediation, when couples came to me, and if both of them are Israeli, I had a couple case, they decided that they agreed to go back to Israel because the father said, anyway, all my families are there. And anyway, I can go back and forth every 3 months. The world really became small. And so that's what they did. And we had an agreement, and we filed to court. And, of course, the judge accepted it if the couples are, both of them agreed for that.
Yes. So it's a lot easier, obviously, and one of the things that divorcing couples or couples that are getting married should really think about is, what happens if there are children and the marriage doesn't work out? What happens if one of the parents, like Adi and I are talking about, want to relocate to another country? So it's wonderful if you have an agreement. But if you don't, then you find yourself in front of a judge who then has to make the decision for you. And quite frankly, it's a heavy burden to prove in court because there's so many different things that you would have to establish.
It's about the age of the kids, no?
A lot of it, children's ages are taken into consideration,
yes,
but they're never a determining factor, even when they're 17 years old, because they are children.
Yes.
So the biggest factors that the courts look at when it comes to relocation is, first and foremost, the big issue is the best interest of the child. So what does that encompass? It encompasses financial and emotional stability for a child if you were to move, the other parents or the non-custodial parents' access time and how that would be affected. Of course,
because all the time people are calling me and they're saying about it. So when the mother said, yes, I want to go back home, back to Israel, because I have a lot of Israelis clients. And then I tell him, okay, but there is a father. So what does it mean? It means that if you're going out to Israel and the father now was very much, involved in the kids' life.
That's right.
So now what? He will see them once every 4 months for a week?
That's right. And that's one of the hardest things because it's how willing or able is the parent who's going to move to be able to make the children accessible to the person who's staying behind. The other issue is, like I said, financial stability and job. But, before, now, as Adi said so cleverly, the world really is a small place now. Because before, getting a job in a different country or a different state or a different city meant you physically had to be there. In today's day and age, and especially now with the pandemic,
with the COVID-19.
That's right. You don't have to be at a specific location. So, for instance, I have plenty of friends who are employed in New York, but are right now sitting on the beach in Florida and working from home.
Yes.
But again, bringing that back to the children, because I think that's what the key is. Employment would go into it, support family. And I actually had an interesting case a couple of years ago with an Italian family. My client was from Italy, and his wife was an American citizen. They married in Italy and lived in Italy for the first 6 years of the children's lives.
Yes.
She then got a job in New York, and they moved to New York. Shortly after they moved to New York, she commenced an action of divorce against her husband. And he wanted to move back to Italy with the children because his whole livelihood was there. The only reason he moved,
you
represented the husband.
Oh my God!
I represented the husband. So he wanted to move back to Italy with the two girls because he had They were there until they were 6. He had a support system there. They lived with
Yes.
their family.
Of course.
And his livelihood, his job was there. The only reason he came to New York in the first place
Because of her.
was because of the wife and her potential.
How old were the kids?
The kids were fairly young. They must have been about, when the case started, they were probably about 4 or 5 years old, 4 and 6 maybe. We couldn't settle. We went to trial.
Wow.
And the judge allowed my client to go back to Italy with the children.
Yeah.
The judge allowed my client to go back to Italy with the children until the children.
In which base? Why the judge allowed them to go back to Italy?
Because the judge saw exactly what we try to prove, which is that he had a substantial.
The main life was actually.
That's right. That's right. That the main support system for these children, where they had school familiarity,
and they grew up there.
They had family there.
They speak the language.
That's right. They speak the language. They had jobs there. So she allowed them to go back with the father to Italy. But the father was also very, during trial, because one of the things we'd worked on is I said, look, if you have any shot of getting custody and to be able to relocate with these children, is if we can prove to the judge that you're going to foster a relationship, that you're not going to stand in the way of the mom seeing the children every chance there is. So we had stipulated to or proposed that for certain holidays, he would physically bring the children to New York, including like summer vacations if she wanted to take them for 2 months.
But you have to understand it's not always the case.
That's right.
So if you have a case now that you came here already, and the kids, you are here already 6, 7, 8 years, and this is your main life now, let's say in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Florida, whatever.
That's right.
But not Israel or France or Italy or whatever you are, your home base, then maybe the judge will say no.
That's right.
And then comes the mediation. And then you can come to mediation, you can talk, the same like you're going to a therapist, but you're going to a mediator, and you can talk with all the legal, alongside this process, and to try to figure out where really you are going to be happy. If you're going to be happy here or there, because it's important to, if let's say, there is a very silly expression that says, happy wife, happy life.
That's right.
I know. I know we're women. I know it's funny. But sometimes it's true, because if, let's say, the mother, she is the custody, let's say, okay, and she is really not happy because her professional is in the other country, and she can't really, develop herself, and she can't really has her own income, and she has to be all the time rely on the ex-husband about finance and money, so then it's hard. So then you have to take it into your consideration. So there is a lot of things, that you should know. One thing that people all the time ask me, can we, if we're getting married and we're coming to New York, can we have like a prenup agreement about the kids that they don't have yet? Yeah. About the kids that if something will happen, we are going back, usually with me it's Israel, going back to Israel. And I tell them, no. First, you don't have kids yet. So what are you going to talk about?
That's right.
And you don't know how many kids are you going to have, first. Second, if you have, let's say, one child, maybe you're going to have more. So we are talking about future kids that do not exist. And the third thing is, even if you have kids, I think that it's a very, very, and you, of course, you are the attorney here in New York, you can correct me or clarify this, that it's going to be very tricky agreement. Because let's say you have the agreement, and the kids are 1 year old and 3 years old. And you are here for 10 years, so the kids now 13 and 11. Now you want to get divorced. So the woman said, I have this prenup agreement, I have the agreement that we did before.
So agreements like that are generally not enforceable in the courts of New York, because in New York, the standard for determining custody or relocation, which falls into part of custody, really, because if the children are living with you in a different state or a different country, you're the parent who's making the day-to-day decisions for them. So in that respect, the standard that the courts look to is something that we call the best interest of the child. Now, that is a very broad area, and those are very broad terms, because best interest of the children can entail anything. It can entail their education, their religious upbringing, their medical needs, their special needs. They can, emotional stability, financial stability, right? all those things go into what the courts look at to determine
The best,
interest. So if you have an agreement from 13 years ago that says, I'm taking the kids and I'm moving to France
Yes.
because the agreement said so, that's not going to work. That's always going to be challenged. It's not going to be enforced. And then the analysis for a judge, at least, starts from a clean slate, where they look at the best interest of the children and where they've been for the length of their lives, where they can get the most emotional, financial stability, what parent can provide that for them, what the access schedule would look like. Because, and I've seen cases litigated, by the way, over moving from Brooklyn to Staten Island, because that's considered a relocation.
Because over 20 miles, you passed the 20
I mean,
miles.
it's not out of state, but it impedes on the other parent's right to be able to see their children. So if you have a parent that you're seeing your kids overnight, let's say Tuesdays and Wednesdays, now you have to go from one borough to another borough.
It's very hard.
And it's difficult and then you have to wake up the kids now at 5 o'clock in the morning to get them to school.
It doesn't make sense.
So
another thing that people are telling me, okay, so if he doesn't want, you know what, I'm going to take the kid and I'm going to fly with no asking.
Well, that's even harder.
This is even harder, and you have to understand that it calls even a kidnap.
That's right. It really does. It's kidnapping of children. And we have something, thankfully, in place that's called the International Hate Convention, which is a special convention that deals with situations like this. Now, and this is internationally. Within the United States, the Hate Convention is not applicable, unfortunately, but it is applicable to situations where one parent takes the child out of the country. And in order to be able to litigate under this particular convention, both the countries have to be signatories to that treaty.
Like, for example, Israel and United States.
That's right.
Together. Europe as well.
That's right. Most of Western Europe.
Most of Western Europe as well. I think Japan as well, if I'm not wrong. So that's what you will know. So what I can give you as a tip, before you're going for litigation, and you pay a lot of money for this kind of issue because it costs a lot. It's a long, long process. Maybe try to talk to each other and try to understand what is the needs. Let's say, if both of you from the same country, let's say Italy, and both of you from Italy, it would be easier, of course. So then you can talk about it. Maybe it's important for you that the kids will raise next to a family, because both of you have a family, let's say in Italy, in France, in Israel, whatever. So maybe it's better. Maybe try to think about, how are we going to do it, even if the kids are not going to stay here? How many times are we going to fly? What is the age of the kids? If they are very young, it would be very, very difficult to take them to start to fly with them back and forth. If they are older, I mean 8 years old, 10 years old, teenagers, it's much easier than 1 year old or 3 years old. So all this you have to take under your consideration to try to talk. If you cannot do it alone, you can go to a mediator, and the mediator is an impartial person, he, she, whatever, they can help you to figure out how are you going to do it and which kind of agreement will be reasonable in order that, to do the best interests for the kids.
That's right. And even in my litigation cases, even stuff that are in front of the judge, I always try to pull that aspect of the case out of litigation and just try to attempt to negotiate a settlement. Have the parties meet and sit down and ask them, maybe we can come to some sort of a resolution where they'll live somewhere for, let's say, a couple of years and then they'll come back.
Right.
Or if there's accessibility to the children, if we can bring them back and forth all the time. And it may help. It doesn't always help, but it's much better, I think, for the children than to subject them to the fighting of litigation in this particular aspect, to sit down with a mediator, to be able to come to some kind of concrete plans. And the other thing is, anything you agree to in an agreement, remember, is a lot better than two things. First of all, a lot better than a court deciding it for you, because a judge doesn't know your intricate details of your life. So they don't know what is the best for you. What is really the best for you as parents and your, they can presume what's best for the children because they have a legal standard to it, but they're not at home with you and your kids at night or during the day.
Every case is very subjective. And I think always I say that the judge, sometimes to go to court is like to go to, when you're going to the casino.
Yes,
you have
that's
the
right.
dice, and you throw the dice.
It's a crapshoot, right?
Yes. And then you don't know what will happen. Of course, the judge will take everything under his consideration,
Right.
with the legal aspect. But not always it's good for one, and maybe it's not good for the other one.
Right.
And
the other thing is, if you come to an agreement, you're setting your own terms. So if there's a turn of events in your life,
you're right.
You can negotiate that into your agreement.
Right.
So that in 5 years, when circumstances change, you have something in your agreement that's going to protect where this goes, instead of the judge, who can't possibly make that kind of a decision for you.
Right. You can talk about a lot of small aspects in order to do it.
The judge would never do.
You're right. And another thing, always you can open the agreement in any point. It's not that I suggest to do it, but sometimes I suggest people, if they have young children, maybe 5-6 years from now we will talk again.
That's
even
right.
Even if not with me, with a different mediator.
That's right.
And we'll see that everything is okay and we can go forward. So this is Relocation.
Yeah. Thank you so much for spending a little time with us. I'm Alla Kuralapnik of Kuralapnik Law and Mediation, boutique matrimonial and family law practice, and I do litigation and family law and matrimonial mediation.
And I'm Adi Schaefer. I'm a mediator here in the United States, and I'm a lawyer from Israel. And I hope we gain something we enhance your information regarding relocation.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye.